We've learned a lot so far. There are still a few things I want to dig into before we dive into an exercise project. In this lecture, I want to talk more about binding attributes. Specifically, I want to get into working with the class attribute. It's common to apply styles conditionally based on the data in our app. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a zip file with some starter files. We'll be moving away from the previous code base. It's starting to get cluttered. I want to focus on this concept alone. Download, unzip the files, and view them in your editor. Pause the video if you need to. There's nothing special going on in these files. We have the typical HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. I've already gone ahead with preparing a Vue instance for you. Here is what it will look like in the browser. It's a circle that says, Hi. Above it is a checkbox. It's non-functional at the moment. We'll want to make it functional by changing the background color of the circle if the checkbox is ticked. Back in the editor, inside the CSS file, we have a class called purple, which will change the background color of an element to purple. How do we dynamically add this class to the element? We can dynamically add a class with binding. We'll switch over to the document. We'll bind a class attribute on the div tag with the class circle. I'm applying two class attributes to the same element. Vue is smart enough to merge them after the template has been processed. We don't have to worry about conflicting issues. The value for this attribute will be an object. The object can contain a list of classes to apply. The key name will represent the class name. The value will be the condition. If the condition is true, the class will be added. Otherwise, it'll be removed. The class we want to add conditionally is the purple class. The value will be the data property isPurple. This property doesn't exist, so let's add it in. Back in the script, we'll define the data function in the configuration object. Inside the data object, we'll add the isPurple property. The initial value will be false. Because the value will always be false, the class will never be applied to the element. We'll want to change that by using the checkbox to toggle the data property. Back inside the document, we're going to use the vModel directive on the checkbox. The vModel directive will work on all form elements, including the select and text area elements. We're going to set this to isPurple. That will take care of toggling the value. If the box is ticked, then the value will be toggled to true. We're finished with binding the input. Back inside the browser, we'll refresh the page. If we look inside the console, we won't find errors. That's great. The initial color of the circle will be green. If we were to toggle the checkbox, the circle would toggle from green to purple. By binding the class attribute, Vue can help us manage the classes for an element. We can use object syntax for dynamically binding classes to elements. In the object, the key names represent the class names. Their value will be the condition to check if the class should be added to the element. Vue will take care of constantly checking the data for changes. It'll swap classes whenever data changes. There is a slight problem with this approach. We're checking for one class, but this can grow to be several classes. Our template would become difficult to read the more classes we add. Luckily, we can use computed properties to solve this dilemma. We're going to copy this object. Then in the Vue instance, we're going to create a computed property called CircleClasses. Inside the function, we'll return the object we copied earlier. We'll need to make one slight adjustment to the object. The isPurple condition will need to be updated to this.isPurple since we're using this in the Vue instance. It's a minor change. Next, inside the template, we can remove the object. We can replace it with the following expression, CircleClasses. Let's go back to the page and refresh it. Toggling the checkbox will toggle the background color like before. We're experiencing the same behavior, but now it's easier to read and format the object. We also gain the performance boost of using computed properties. Computed properties update whenever the data it uses is updated. Let's keep playing around with this. Not every class has to be conditionally checked. Instead, you can jump around different classes. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go back to the editor. We're going to create a drop-down below the checkbox where the text color can be white, black, or orange. For the color white, I left the value blank because the default color is already white. We don't need to specify a class. I've defined classes for changing the text color to black and orange. You can find them in the CSS file. We'll need to bind this dropdown to a value in our data object. We'll use the vModel directive. We'll set it to the selected color property. This data property doesn't exist in our application. We'll need to define it. Inside the data object, we'll define this property. The initial value will be an empty string. The last step is to bind the value to the circle element. Inside the template, we'll change the class binding to selected color. Alright, let's give it a test. Refresh the page. The circle will appear as normal. If I were to select a different color in the dropdown, the text color would change. This is exactly what we wanted. However, if I were to tick the checkbox, the color change doesn't get applied. This is because we're passing in one expression. Unfortunately, we can't use the object syntax since we're not checking if a class should be added. We could refactor the object to check if a specific class should be added, but there's a better solution. Switch back to the editor. Inside the template, we're going to update the class attribute to be an array. For the second value in the array, we're going to pass in circle classes. View will loop through the array. It'll apply the first item in the array as a class. The second item will have its properties iterated. It'll run through each condition to determine whether a class should be applied or not. By using an array, we get the best of both worlds. Let's give this application another test. Refresh the page and try toggling between both input fields. No matter what combination we choose, the classes will work as intended. You're free to use array or object syntax. You can even choose neither. It's acceptable to bind one value. It depends on the situation you're in. Alright, that's enough for now. Let's move forward.